You're listening to The Reality Check, episode 404, recorded May 31st, 2016.
This is your reality check.
Hi everyone, and welcome to The Reality Check, your weekly Canadian podcast that explores a wide range of controversies and curiosities using science and critical thinking. I'm your host, Darren McKee, and with me, as usual, are Adam Gardner.
What's up, Lunoids?
Christina Roach.
Hello.
And producer Pat.
Hi, everyone.
We have a great show for you today. Pat is going to give us another game of Name That, and then Adam is going to look into whether the stars we see at night are really there. But first, Christina is going to explore whether the full moon has an effect on us.
We recently got the following email from listener Matt M. Greetings, TRC crew. Have you done an episode on full moons? I'm a nurse, and it's very frustrating how many doctors and nurses believe the phases of the moon play a role in our daily lives. It's frustrating that medical professionals could believe something so unscientific. How can I trust that my patients, family, or even myself are getting the best care when practitioners believe this? How can I trust that the duties being delegated to me by doctors and senior nurses are in the patient's best interest when they believe this stuff? Well, after reading this email, I had to check in with our favorite emergency doctor and friend of the show, Ken Milne, from Skeptic's Guide to Emergency Medicine, and this is what he had to say. I have had many emergency medical professionals refer to the full moon effect. It depends on the situation, but I try to point out confirmation bias. I tend to use it as an opportunity to promote skepticism and critical thinking. The lunar effect, also sometimes referred to as the Transylvania effect, is this notion that the phases in the roughly 29.5-day lunar cycle somehow influences human behavior and mental health. More specifically, many people believe that when there's a full moon, people are more likely to act out or get injured or commit crimes and so on. The theory even goes further, suggesting that gravitational effects of the moon affects things like how our body behaves during surgery and affects fertility. I'm sure many listeners have heard people say there must be a full moon tonight. I'm sure you guys have heard that.
Yes, I've heard it all too often, actually.
Yeah, I've definitely heard that a lot.
So people say this in an effort to explain someone's behavior or some other unusual occurrence that transpires during a full moon. Lunar comes from the Latin word luna, meaning moon, which is also the prefix in the word lunatic. Belief in the lunar lunacy effect has persisted since the Middle Ages in Europe, when people believed some humans morphed into werewolves or vampires during a full moon.
To be fair, without that, we wouldn't have had Teen Wolf.
Right.
Even Shakespeare has a line about the moon's effect in Othello. It is the very error of the moon. She comes more near the earth than she was wont, and makes men mad. As Matt mentions in his email, this seems to be a widely held belief, especially with EMS personnel, hospital staff, and police workers who all work really late-night shifts. A few years ago, BBC News reported that some British police departments actually started adding extra officers on nights with a full moon. So there's been a considerable number of studies over the years aimed at finding any statistical connection between the moon and human behavior or human biology. There were at least 40 published studies on the purported lunar lunacy connection and 20 or so published studies on the purported lunar birth rate connection by the late 80s alone. However, the majority of legit and reliable studies comparing the lunar phases to hospital admissions, seizures, violence, suicides, births, to name a few, have consistently shown little or no statistical connection. In the case of any studies claiming to reveal some kind of connection, well, those really just turned out to be flawed, or they haven't been peer-reviewed, or they're not reproducible. Furthermore, several extensive literature reviews and meta-analyses have found no correlation between the lunar cycle and human biology or behavior. So briefly, here's a couple of examples from reputable studies and peer-reviewed journals. Although some patients believe their seizures were triggered by a full moon, a 2004 study in the journal Epilepsy and Behavior found no connection between epileptic seizures and moon phases. A 2005 study by Mayo Clinic researchers looking at how many patients checked into a psychiatric emergency department between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. over the period of several years found no statistical difference between the 3 nights surrounding full moons versus other nights. Another study reported in American Journal of Emergency Medicine examined 151,000 records of emergency room visits to a suburban hospital and also found no difference between full moon versus other nights.
Yeah, but what about 152,000?
Maybe. An article published in PubMed last year titled No Evidence of Purported Lunar Effect on Hospital Admission Rates or Birth Rates looked at studies that showed a fraction of nursing professionals actually believe in a purported correlation between the phases of the Earth's moon and human affairs such as birth rates, blood loss, or fertility. Author Jean-Luc Margot, a professor at Department of Earth, Planetary and Space Sciences in the Department of Physics and Astronomy at the University of California, looked at a 2004 report suggesting the number of hospital admissions related to gastrointestinal bleeding was somehow influenced by the phases of the Earth's moon. Those authors actually claimed that the rate of hospital admissions to their bleeding unit was higher during the full moon than at any other time. But the report contained a number of methodological and statistical flaws, and after reanalyzing the data, there was no evidence that the full moon influenced the rate of hospital admissions. Margot concluded, data collection and analysis shortcomings, as well as powerful cognitive biases, can lead to erroneous conclusions about the purported lunar effect on human affairs. So guys, why in 2016, with all the available resources we have at our fingertips, does this urban legend continue to be so widespread?
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to blame the media, right? News coverage over the years hasn't done a lot to help dispel the myth, nor have countless movies and books perpetuating lunar lunacy. But we just can't blame the media. To Dr. Ken's point, confirmation bias, which is the tendency to interpret new evidence as confirmation of our existing beliefs, really does play a big role. University of Wisconsin psychologists Lauren and Jean Chapman call this illusory correlation. That's a perception of an association that does not, in fact, exist. Our minds have a tendency of recalling most events better than non-events, and we've covered this on the show numerous times. So when there's a full moon and something weird happens, we're more likely to notice and make a connection that fits our preconceived notions. If there's a full moon and nothing noteworthy happens, then we don't really make a mental note of it. Another interesting example of this is when people who suffer from joint pain insist that it gets worse when it rains, even though research doesn't support this assertion.
Oh, extra myth busted within.
Oh yeah, I hear that a lot. My knee's acting up. It's going to rain or something, right?
Benjamin Radford, the bad science columnist at livescience.com, explains it simply. If police and doctors are expecting that full moon nights will be more hectic, they may interpret an ordinary night's traumas and crises as more extreme than usual. Our expectations influence our perceptions, and we look for evidence that confirms our beliefs. Now, some of you may have heard people suggest that since humans are mostly made of water, surely the tides have an effect on us.
Mm-hmm.
While it's true that the average human body can range from 50 to 75% water, I promise the moon is not magically disrupting the water molecules in your nervous system.
What about non-magically through the same effect as the tides?
Or magically or not magically.
All right.
You shut your science face at him.
First of all, the gravitational effects of the moon are way too small to have any meaningful effect on our brains or behavior. The late astronomer Georgia Bell of UCLA noted that a mosquito sitting on your arm exerts a more powerful gravitational pull on you than the moon does. Also, the moon's gravitational force only affects open bodies of water, like oceans and lakes. It does not affect contained sources of water. If you're still not convinced, the highest tides don't just occur during a full moon, but also during a new moon when the moon is between the Earth and the Sun. So the gravitational effect of the moon is just as strong during new moons when the moon is invisible to us.
I think actually one of the most interesting things about that segment was that it wasn't covered on TRC before now.
Yeah, I was just about to say the same thing as Pat. If you'd asked me if we'd done this, if I had done this, I might have bet money on it. I've done about 7 segments on the moon, and somehow not this one.
We, when I was a kid, I bought a hamster at the pet store. Hamster was pregnant. Apparently that can happen. And the hamster's babies were born on the full moon. And, my mom was like, oh yeah, that's a thing that happens in the moon and all this stuff. And, I bought it totally, and we had one of them was called Mooney and one of them was called Looney, and it was it was a big thing. So yeah, it was that's definitely something I believed when I was younger, and I guess I've read 100 times that it's not true, but we somehow missed it. So
And it didn't influence the naming of any other pets in your life, did it?
Luna is named after the guy from Sailor Moon. No relation to this particular myth.
Suspicious.
Yeah.
Thanks, Christina. I thought it was interesting that there's no effect whatsoever, not because I think the full moon does have a direct effect on people, but I thought it's possible that enough people believe it, that they have a social license that they give to themselves or society such that they engage in more erratic behavior, which then does involve police more, or people go to doctors and hospitals more because they think there's something happening to them.
Yeah, you're pregnant, and you're like, well, I know this baby's going to probably come on the full moon, and, maybe that could affect your behavior somehow.
And now, onto a game of Name That.
All right, here we go with another edition of everyone's favorite mostly guessing game, Name That. Since Adam's segment is about space and Christina's segment is about the moon, I thought I would stick with that theme.
Oh.
This week we play the Name That, the Apollo Missions episode.
Oh, man.
We have 5 questions with a tiebreaker question if required. As usual, I'll give you a piece of information and then ask you to name that from the choices provided. We'll rotate the order, and I've randomly chosen who will go first. Christina, you're up. Question number 1. The Apollo 11 mission landed a lunar module on the moon for the first time on July 20th, 1969. Actually, July 21st if you were watching someplace like Australia or New Zealand, but name that. What was the lunar landing site? A, the Sea of Tranquility, B, the Sea of Storms, C, Sea of Rains, or D, the Sea of Crises?
What was B?
Sea of Storms.
All I can think of is Eddie Izzard doing that bit. I'm going to say Sea of Tranquility.
Christina says A. Next is Adam.
I really don't know.
Okay.
So I'm going to say Sea of Tranquility, because for some reason it just sounded okay.
Adam agrees with Christina. And lastly, Darren.
Much like Adam, I've heard the term Sea of Tranquility. It sounds more familiar than the other ones, and I hope that's because they actually landed there. Maybe they just landed there and then they called it that. Sea of Tranquility.
All right, so you all agree on A, and the answer is A, Sea of Tranquility.
Oh, see, for a second I thought that might be a trick question from you.
The Apollo 11 landing site was one of 3 sites selected for the first lunar landing from a list of 30 sites originally under consideration. Question number 2. Adam, name that. According to Apollo astronauts, what does the moon smell like? A, cheese, B, burnt gunpowder, C, gasoline, or D, coffee grounds?
Cheese would be funny, but I'm pretty sure that predates 1969. I'm going to say burnt gunpowder, even though that's probably the one that I've never smelled out of those things.
Adam says B. Next is Darren.
Sorry, cheese, gunpowder, what were the other two?
Gasoline or coffee grounds.
Gunpowder does sound like, which is the ship exhaust. Coffee grounds. Okay, gunpowder as well.
Darren agrees with Adam. And lastly, Christina.
I was going to say B as well.
All right. Everyone says B, and you are all correct.
Woohoo!
According to Harrison Jack Schmitt, a scientist astronaut who walked on the moon's surface in December of 1972, all the Apollo moonwalkers agreed that when they took off their helmets, regolith or moon dirt in the cabin air smelled like spent gunpowder.
Yeah, so they obviously didn't take off their helmets on the surface of the moon.
Right.
They took off their helmets and the
dirt was stuck to their boots or whatever, yes. Question number 3. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin were the first and second people to walk on the moon. Darren, name that. Who was the third member of the Apollo 11 mission? A. Alan Shepard, B. James Lovell, C. Michael Collins, or D. William Andres?
It's a good question, Pat, because some of those names sound familiar, but for the reasons that they're not actually the answer. B. Lovell.
Darren says B. Lovell. Next is Christina.
I'm going to say A.
Christina says A. Alan Shepard. And lastly, Adam.
I'm going to say C. Michael Collins.
While Armstrong and Aldrin became the first humans to walk on another world, pilot Michael Collins stayed behind in the command module and orbited the moon. Going into question 4, I have Adam with 3, Christina with 2, and Darren with 2.
Christina, name that. How many people have walked on the moon? A, 8, B, 10, C, 12, or D, 14?
Oh, man. I'm going to go with A8.
Christina says A, 8. Next is Adam.
I'm going to say D14. I think it's more than people expect just because, people kind of stopped caring.
Adam says D14. And lastly, Darren.
I think it is more than people expect, and it could be 14, but I also know that there weren't that many funded missions, because once you're there, why go again? Mm-hmm. I'll say 12, which was C, I think.
Darren says C12, and Darren is correct. 12 astronauts have walked on the moon's surface. While 3 astronauts flew to the moon twice, none of them ever landed on the moon more than once. Going into the last question, I have Christina with 2, Adam with 3, and Darren with 3. Question number 5. A new mineral was discovered among the moon samples that astronauts brought back to Earth. Adam, name that. What was it called? Armalcolite, brookite, titanite, or warwickite?
Ooh, I like warwickite. Makes me think of Warwick Davis, the guy who played Wicket in Return of the Jedi.
Adam says D. Next is Darren.
Aside from warwickite, please repeat the other 3.
Armalcolite, brookite, titanite, or warwickite?
Armalcolite.
And lastly, Christina.
I'm going to go with A.
And Christina and Darren are correct. Previously unknown, Armalcolite was discovered from samples taken from the Sea of Tranquility. The name Armalcolite is derived from the 3 Apollo 11 astronauts' names: Armstrong, Aldrin, Collins.
Cool.
So congratulations, Darren is your winner. Do you guys want to play the tiebreaker just for kicks?
Yes, I would love to play the tiebreaker.
We know that the first moon landing took place on July the 20th, 1969, in the U.S. anyhow. Darren, what was the date of the launch? July 15th, July 16th, July 17th, or July 18th?
Oh boy.
Wow, good question.
How long did it take to get to the moon?
Right.
380,000 kilometers approximately, but they did in a circular orbit. I'll say the 16th.
Darren says B. Next is Christina.
I'm going to say the 17th.
Christina says C. And lastly, Adam.
I thought it took 6 days to get to the moon. Obviously, that is not correct. So I'm going to go with A, 15.
And Adam says A, and Darren cements his win with an extra correct answer. The massive Saturn V rocket lifted off from NASA's Kennedy Space Center at 9:32 Eastern Daylight Time on July 16, 1969. Well done, Darren.
Thank you. I would like to thank luck and serendipity for this win. Adam is less concerned about the moon. We know he cares about the stars and whether they're still out there when we look at them at night.
Following my topic from a couple of weeks ago about a Quebec boy who didn't really find a Mayan city, we got an email from fan of the show Tim. Tim has written into the show countless times, suggesting such hard-hitting topics as fact-checking Airbud. So I knew this was serious business. His first point was to correct me on my calling Orion's belt the Orion constellation. So indeed, Orion is a constellation, but Orion's belt basically is 3 stars which make up the belt of the Orion constellation, the Hunter Orion. I didn't really have any idea about this mistake, so I thought that was good to point out, and I just wanted to mention that on the show. Tim also had a great topic idea, myth, which I had heard myself many times, and that is the idea that the stars we look at are so ancient that many of them are actually dead. So yes, stars are far, and yes, stars do die, but stars live so long that this isn't really relevant. Let's look at some numbers to illustrate that.
Just before you go there, Adam, is the idea behind this that we're looking at light that is coming from such a distant place that the star may no longer be there, but we're still seeing the light travel?
Yes, that's basically the idea, because they're so far and the light is taking so long to get here.
Gotcha.
Stars are light years away in that it takes light many years to get from there to here. The furthest visible stars are usually around 3,000 light years away, so it takes that light 3,000 years to get to the Earth. Deneb is around that distance away. Mu Cephei is closer to 6,000 light years away, and the furthest that you can see is Cassiopeia, which is 16,308 light years away. The vast majority of stars are less than 1,000 light years away, practically speaking.
Adam, when you say visible, you're talking about with the naked eye?
Yes, so when you're gazing up at the stars. When you look through a telescope, you can see a lot more, obviously.
Light from Cassiopeia reaching us before the agricultural revolution. That began before the agricultural revolution.
Yeah. So the closest star to us, the Sun, is 8 light minutes away. So we don't ever really know if that the Sun is still there, only that it was there 8 minutes ago. Though we can really infer that it's probably still there based on everything we know about sun, stars, and things like that.
The consistency of the laws of physics in the universe and what we know, yes.
Yeah. After that, the next closest is Alpha Centauri, which is actually 3 stars, and these are 4.24 light years away. So when we look at the stars, we aren't seeing them as they were at any given time, but we're seeing a bunch of stars as they were a bunch of different times, ranging usually between about 5 and 1,000 years ago. It also should be mentioned that the furthest stars are actually quite big. If our sun was about 60 light years away, we wouldn't be able to see it. Other things to consider are the age of stars. Our sun, for example, will live billions of years. Even stars which burn out very quickly live over 1 million years. A few thousand years next to millions is actually quite short, even shorter next to billions. We also need to consider how stars die. Some stars will go supernova, and we have a list of which stars are supernova candidates. Even so, the time frame for them exploding can be in the tens of thousands of years. So as listener Tim mentioned, when he's showing people stars through a telescope, he shows them supernova candidates and basically says, except for those, the rest of those stars you're looking at are almost certainly still there, and those ones you just looked at are probably there too. Stars that don't explode fade away, but they do so over such a long time that they won't just blink out in the next 1,000 years. They will fade very gradually over tens of millions of years, which again makes the time the light takes to get here be very minuscule compared to how long it's going to take for them to fade. So there are galaxies too. Some of what appear to be stars to us with the naked eye are actually galaxies. While they're far enough away that some of the stars in that galaxy are certainly dead, we're not looking at those individual stars. We're looking at the galaxy. Some are coming and going throughout that time.
Just to clarify, galaxies usually have tons of stars in them.
Oh, yeah, billions of stars.
So if you happen to lose a couple, you wouldn't dim the lights.
You wouldn't see it. So let's take this analogy and compare it to people. Say a star will live to be 1 billion years and is 1,000 light years away. That light took only 1/1,000,000th of its life to get here. The average Canadian lifespan is 81 years. So the equivalent 1/1,000,000th of a lifetime would be 42 and a half minutes. So if you don't hear from your friend for 42 minutes, do you assume maybe they died? So you shouldn't assume that star you're looking at is dead.
So, just to elaborate, when I look at my friend, I'm seeing him as they were 42 minutes ago.
Well, if you get like an email from them, it's a 42-year-old email.
Oh, that's a good point.
It's like maybe your friend, isn't in the same state of mind as they were when that email was written. They might be sleeping.
It's a good nuance, because there are past selves,
Having
and we're
a
ever
sandwich.
recreated anew.
Yeah, all these shadows of ourselves throughout time. Space is vast, but the stars we see with the naked eye are relatively close, all things considered. Light takes a long time to get here, but that long time is a fraction of the very long time that is the life of your average star. So most, if not all, of those stars you're gazing up at most nights are still around.
Well, the one thing I want to say, Adam, is that I used the term naked eye and you used it as well. And I know for some reason, some astronomers have a real issue with that. So what we really mean is the unaided eye. The other thing I thought was interesting is that you touched on the fact that Alpha Centauri is actually 3 stars, which could have been a whole segment on the show.
Yeah, and I think we only actually see 2 of them. That's a whole other layer of complexity there.
Alpha Centauri A and Alpha Centauri B, and then there's this dwarf that kind of is gravitationally bound to them, I think, right?
Yeah, that's my understanding.
It's incredible. People take a little bit of information, like they make this assumption that, okay, well, we're made of water, the tides, the moon must affect us, or, well, we're looking at the sky, those stars must be dead. And then when you listen to the explanation.
Well, I think that the stars might be dead. It goes somewhere to explain a really cool idea, and that's that things are so distant that it takes that much time for the light to hit us.
Right.
And so that's kind of a cool way of demonstrating what light years are.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is that like the life of a star is very long, and they're probably still there.
Yeah, excellent points, Pat. That's exactly it. That space is really, really big. We want people to understand that, and they onboarded the slightly wrong piece of information about it. But it shows an interest and a curiosity, and it's a very interesting effect.
Yeah.
Right.
We look forward to your emails about what I got wrong.
I'm sure everyone now looking in the sky feels a lot more hope, because what they're looking at is no longer dead, but still out there. Thanks for joining us once again. Christina told us that the full moon does not have an effect on us, aside from looking pretty. That I am fantastic at name that once in a while. And we really don't know much about the Apollo missions as much as we should. And finally, Adam showed that most of the stars that we can see are actually still out there burning brightly.
Wait, Darren, did I read something on Facebook about our podcast awards?
Excellent point, Adam. Yes, you did. We are happily nominated in the Science and Medicine category at podcastawards.com. Could you please go there and vote for us? You can even vote once a day. And until next time, think better to act better.
Peace out, Lunoids.
Stay classy, not smart-assy.
Good night, everyone.
The Reality Check is an independently Canadian-produced podcast. For show notes or to discuss this episode, visit our Facebook page and website at trcpodcast.com. For general inquiries or to send a topic or parody suggestion, email info@trcpodcast.com. Help support the show by leaving a review on iTunes and liking us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at @TRC_podcast.